Jackie Capstick, and this is my podcast, The Natural Healing Reel. Today, I have an amazing guest from Australia, and her name is Carey Hauri. I believe I said that properly. She'll clarify it for us. Anyway, she has an incredible background in journalism and that whole industry. And she was just explaining to me all of the different venues that she has done. She's a coach. She teaches speaking, which I clearly am going to get myself some classes. Anyways, let me introduce you to Carey. How are you today, Carey? For being here.
Hello, Jackie. I'm very well, thank you. And you?
I am good. a little bit scattered. Let's say your name again. You just went over it with me.
Carey?
Yeah.
Hauri.
So Australia. And how long have you been in Australia? Like, are you a lifer from there or?
Not technically. So my family and we immigrated when I was 6 years old from Switzerland to Australia. So that's where the surname comes from. It's actually a very typical Swiss name in one corner of Switzerland. It's the only place on the planet where I don't have to spell it out. And as I said, when I was 6 years old, we immigrated to Australia, and I have grown up here, but I did spend about 15, 20 years or so living outside of the country until in 2004, I came back and settled here. And that was mainly because my first career, as you mentioned, was as a journalist for an international not-for-profit organisation, which took me to some different places. And then towards the last few years of my time based overseas, I really sensed that my childhood dream of becoming a journalist and traveling the world to make it a better place was transitioning into something different and something new. At that time, coaching was just starting to emerge as a thing. And when I found out about it, it was the perfect fit. Up until then, I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be a teacher. I didn't want to be a counselor. I didn't want to be a psychologist. I just didn't know what that looked like. And then when I came across life coaching for the first time, that's when I realized that is a perfect fit for what I would like to do as my second career. So I transitioned. That meant leaving my overseas and international life, coming back to Adelaide, which is where I'm speaking to you from today, the traditional lands of the Kaurna people. And I returned here, retrained, and that was about 15 years ago now, and have established myself in a whole new career. However, they do have something in common. I realized that as a journalist, my life was all about communicating other people's stories. As a coach, it became about helping other people change their stories. And now, as I transition into doing more professional speaking, I feel I've started a new chapter in my life where it's about sharing my stories as well.
That's awesome. Like, what a great life you've had. I love it. I've had no experience in any of that, as I shared with you. And so what did you do to transition yourself from journalism to life coaching? Like, did you do some training, or was it just kind of a natural thing that was just always a part of you?
It was a part of me. I loved helping people fulfill their potential. That was something that's always been something that was a big part of what motivated me. And it was interesting because when I came back to Australia, I did find an old purpose statement I had written many years earlier, and that phrase was in there. Now, this was when I was still working as a journalist, but the helping people fulfill their potential was in there, which I found very interesting. I had completely forgotten I had written this mission statement. So it has always been a part of that. as a journalist, it was actually excellent training and preparation for coaching, because it also involves asking the right question at the right time, which you can only do if you are able to build rapport very quickly and well with people. So as a journalist, I had maybe 30 seconds to a minute, sometimes a little bit longer, to get to know someone, depending on the context, before interviewing them, if it was a formal interview. A lot of my work was also writing. So it was more visiting different projects, seeing what people were doing, asking the questions to find out about the projects, but also how those projects were changing people's lives. So those skills served me very well. I just realized that I also, what started happening was I began to do more mentoring of new staff. By this stage, I had worked in a cross-cultural and international context for some years. So I understood the challenges of that. And so as other people were struggling with the challenges that international life, cross-cultural work brings, I realized I had something to share with them and pass on. And then one day I had the aha moment where I realized I enjoyed that aspect more, which wasn't even part of my formal role, than I actually did the journalism. And that really got me thinking, so if I'm really loving the mentoring, the one-on-one support, the helping people work through their challenges, then maybe that's something I want to pursue. And it was a 2-year process of decision making, of answering the what question as well as the where. Do I stay overseas? Do I come back to Australia? And it became very clear that my place was back here. And so I made that decision. And that then involved doing a 6-month training course in what we call a Certificate 4 in life coaching. And from then on, started the new adventure.
Yeah, so I believe that you're right. Like about 15 years ago, the life coaching really hit the pavement, didn't it? And I remember when it started, I was thinking, who, because I knew quite a few people who took that on as well as a role. And I didn't really, I wasn't really seeing like myself getting one. Now I can't imagine not having one. It's so hard to see ourselves, and to have somebody who has compassion and holds a space of love and who can see what we can't see, it's just such a gift. And clearly you're very intuitive to be the journalism and to be snapping in with people like that, right? So what is the biggest gift that you give to people, do you believe?
Good question. What you just mentioned is really important, is being able to hold a space for people from a place of love and compassion, of being able to listen and really listen. And I think tapping into that intuition that you've also mentioned and allowing that to lead a conversation and knowing what question to ask that might help shift the person's perception. At the end of the day, it all comes down to our thinking, how we see the world, or more importantly, first of all, how we see ourselves. And the wisdom that comes with time. I do believe there are some young people that I have encountered who already seem to have an amazing amount of wisdom that they're just bring into the world with them and then is honed. Unfortunately, I've also come across older people who have never tapped into that wisdom because the awareness, they've not had the awareness to go there and really confront themselves. And I think that's part of, through the coaching work that I do, is to help people look at themselves and become more aware of themselves and what is happening in their heart and in their thinking, and what is working and what isn't working, and helping them to just shift that perception of who they are And I think the starting point there is learning to love ourselves, that we have worth and value, and that we're here for a purpose, which doesn't necessarily mean a lofty purpose of being another Oprah Winfrey or a prime minister of a country or writing a best-selling book or anything necessarily that huge. It can be just being who we are in our day-to-day lives, but being that love and that compassion and that wisdom to those that we are around, that have been brought into our lives.
You know, I have really learned a lot about holding space of love and compassion and what that really means, and actually having somebody hear you. And those gifts, if you even have one person who can hold that space for you in a lifetime, it is the biggest gift I think that you can receive. And then role modeling that, you being that and walking that, you know, you're leading and showing, you know, it's huge. It's such a huge gift. I believe that's what I've actually really come to know for myself in the last few years. So, you know, good for you, right? Because it's all about giving, and it's always, the gift is in the giving, isn't it?
I think that's absolutely spot on. It's in the giving that we fill ourselves up, I think. Now, there's a fine line there. I have been through burnout. So there's a point where, so I'm still learning about all of this. I need to make that very clear to everyone who is listening today. I am still learning. However, I am learning, and I would like to think that I am integrating what I learn into my life and hopefully not repeating the same mistakes too many times. But there's a giving from a place of fullness where we love ourselves and we make sure that we do what we need to so that we are able to give from a place of fullness. But then there's also the giving where it is beyond the capacity. Well, I didn't take care of myself. I didn't pace myself. I didn't understand what I needed to flourish and thrive. And I gave and gave and gave nonstop. I used to be a very type A personality. I have changed a lot. So anyone who thinks you can't change, that is not true. When I realized that how I was in the world was not serving me or other people, I started looking at that. But part of that was burning out and finding myself a bit of a mess after my first 4 years overseas back in Australia, and just a pretty mushy mess. And it took me about 2-3 years to rebuild myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, my identity. All of that was pretty much stripped away. However, it made me realize I am not what I do. I am not my name or where I come from or my cultural or ethnic background or my passport or any of those external aspects of who we are. They're a part of who we are in how we navigate the world, but there's a lot to us than just that. And really understanding that was the first part of understanding who I really am. And that wisdom helped me then, I think, to recognize that in other people and understand who they really are as well.
And it's funny that you're talking about that right now, because I actually did a vlog today on exactly what you're just saying right now. I love it. It's The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. I don't know if you're aware of it, but literally the whole chapter was exactly what you're just talking about, that I was vlogging today. And he's going through, who am I? And you know, you're not your name, you're not, right? And but I think what you're saying is so important, just having the awareness. And that doesn't come unless you're bottoming out, I don't believe. I experienced a similar thing where as a hairstylist, and you're just giving, and you're carrying and you're taking it on, and you're coming home with it all, because we don't have we're not taught how our body is to function properly, right? It's passed through us, not, it sounds like you were like me, we're just giving everything that we have of ourselves instead of having it come through us, right?
I think one of the things about being younger, to be honest, in my case, even if I was told all of this, I would have not listened. I was the one that would have said, no, what do you mean I need to rest? I'm fine. I don't need that. I saw myself as quite unbreakable and hadn't yet really come face to face with my own mortality. So in that sense, I can do anything. And I had a real interesting, and it's still something I have to be aware of, a fear of missing out. I didn't want to miss out on any adventures or and I must admit, sometimes I'm still the last person to leave a dinner party or an event or a conference.
Good for you.
Because I just, apart from the fact that I love connecting with people and those situations, but it was very strong in the first half of my life, this fear that I might be missing out. And that I needed to go here and there and everywhere, and wherever there was an opportunity, take it on. And of course, I'm also a recovering perfectionist. So not only did I take on projects and opportunities, but then they also had to be executed to perfection, which of course is not possible. It took me a while to realize how depleting and self-defeating that perfectionism is and was. I mean, I still, as I said, I'm a recovering perfectionist. It still kicks in, but of course it's just another symptom of fear. And if the one lesson or the one wisdom that I have now really started to understand and am absolutely convinced about, we only can really choose two approaches to life: fear or love. And I would say a lot of the first part of my life, yes, I did come from a place of love, but most of it, the default was fear. And it expressed itself as needing to control, the fear of missing out, perfectionism, making sure that I met other people's expectations. So there was a lot going on there that was not healthy. And over the years,
this though, I think that is so common. I don't have it. I have the opposite. So the youngest, and anyways, but I have a lot of people whom I know that struggle with that. And so we get that from, we're watching that as children, right? Was your mom like that, or where?
I would say it was probably more a response. I was raised, I describe my parents as hippie parents.
Oh, cool.
So that they have mellowed out a little bit to varying degrees. However, I was raised fairly much what I call free range. So I may have had a bit too much independence. And I think looking back, and this is all with hindsight, and of course, my parents did the best that they could and knew how to do at the time. Growing up had its own challenges that impacted my relationship with my parents and my mum especially. And I think some of those traits that we have in life that are not helpful, that are not beneficial, are defenses that we create to deal with some of those challenges that we're not yet equipped to deal with, or, as you've said, we've not been taught really how to deal with them, or we haven't seen it modeled for us. So we kind of make it up as we go along until we realize, okay, I don't think what I've created here is really working anymore. it's served its usefulness and its purpose. However, it's time to find a better way of living and dealing with life's challenges.
And I think that that was so common. Like my parents say, like I think we raised ourselves, right? Like, and you're looking back at that, and the way that we hover and raise our kids is the exact opposite of how we were raised, because we're trying to fit into the box, and everybody's trying to, well, like, be perfect, right? Everybody's trying to be, you know what I mean? So that, have your kids and all these things, so I guess we're all doing the society thing, trying to fit into the box. It's like getting your fat toe into the Cinderella shoe, right? None of us really actually fit, but we all try.
And that's something I am grateful to my parents for, is they led an unconventional life. So that's what I had modeled for me. And so I had the freedom to be able to go overseas and work in different countries and live in different countries and travel and not get married and not have children and not buy the house and not build a traditional career and climb the ladder. So for that, I am very grateful that I was never felt that I had to do this or that or fulfill other society's expectations, because my parents never did that. Immigrating to Australia was, back in those days, was a huge thing. It meant a 6-week journey by ship. Oh, wow. Around much of the world. In those days, this was the early 70s, travel back to Europe was expensive. It was much longer than the flights are now. The opportunities to return weren't the way that they are now. Having said that, nobody in Australia has been doing much traveling the past two years because our borders have been closed. However, my parents modeled an adventurous life for me. And I'm really grateful to them for that. So I was quite open to the fact that I didn't need to follow the traditional path. However, at the same time, I had set goals for myself so I kind of straddled those two worlds a little bit.
Are you an only child?
I am the oldest so we're the classic sort of blended mishmash family. I'm the oldest child. I have a half brother who's we call him he's now the baby, because we also have a wonderful stepsister who went from only child to middle child. But we were all adults when she joined our family, and my brother is 8 years younger. So I was kind of an only child for 8 years, and I think that does make a difference in terms of being quite independent and having to be in your own company a little bit.
Oh yeah, and that's probably where your independence is, or your doing all of that stuff came from, right? Because you were kind of like the parent of yourself almost, right? Sounds like. Was there a reason why you guys left Switzerland? Was it not good at that point in time, or was it just a change?
It was, from my understanding, my parents found it quite restrictive to live in Switzerland, and they loved the idea of adventure and starting this new life in Australia, which was an unknown entity back in the 70s. So I think it was really their sense for adventure and a new challenge. And one amazing aspect that I really appreciate about Australia is that there's a lot of freedom to explore and to pursue different opportunities. It is it's young and old. We have the world's oldest unbroken traditional Indigenous culture of 60,000 years. However, at the same time, European settlement and is very recent. And so nothing is really strongly entrenched in that sense. And so as immigrants, the world was literally our oyster in that sense. And I had opportunities that maybe I wouldn't have had if I had grown up somewhere else.
Well, you know what? How big risk takers, right? Like I really admire their, to be able to step out and to do that. I think that that's maybe a more common thing in our age group, but our parents, I don't know that it was as, I don't know for sure, but just knowing my parents, everything was, they weren't risk takers. Everything was, I think coming from maybe the era of not having, right?
Mm-hmm.
War and the whatever else was going on, right? Totally different, totally different perspective on, oh, I would not have. Anyways, I'm grateful that I got to live in the abundant life that we get to have, right? Or that we had. Well, you know what? All of that is such an incredible gift to be able to, like, for yourself, and then like having that world perspective and life coaching. I think that's a huge asset. I didn't get to do any of that. I have traveled very little, but I still intend to get going. Anyways, I admire the fact that, you've had all of those experiences, and then I just think it would make you such a more well-rounded person to be able to assist people. I'm listening to you thinking there's a lot of gifts that come with those experiences, right? Because you're like this free risking, right? Like walking as you're going, right? Like creating your life as you're walking on it, right? Whereas here we're always back to planning. Maybe that's why you're a planner, to make it feel a little more safe. Or
I think it's a bit of both. It's always, I think when we can balance the tension of both, of being in the moment and creating or living life in the moment as we move through it, at the same time having an idea about the kind of life that we would like to be living, because of course we create that as we live a certain way in the present moment, but not hanging on too tightly to what that might look like and what the expectations are around that, and absolutely letting go of the how it might eventuate. And that's another piece of wisdom that I have picked up along the way, that the more tightly I try to control how I live my life and what I want to happen, the less enjoyable it actually is, because I'm not living in the present moment. I generally look more to the future. That has been a little bit of a challenge for me, that I'm quite able to let go of the past and move on from the past. However, to stay in the present moment and fully enjoy where I am right here, right now, has been a real lesson to learn and something to practice and cultivate, without constantly bouncing into the future and seeing how I would like life to be. And then when it's not that way, experiencing quite high anxiety, which I've had to deal with in the past. Because when you look to the future, there's often, yes, you have an idea of what the ideal scenario might be. However, my mind, like many other people's minds, tended to gravitate towards the what if scenario, but the worst case scenario. And learning to trust life, that life always supports me, that life is always there providing for me, that it has my back, and to really trust that. Like I've said before, I'm still learning
Do you know what?
But
I
it's
hope that
a
we're
much
always,
more rewarding way to live in the present moment, when you know that what you do, if you are making the right, living from a place of love and compassion and wisdom in the here and now, the way that the future pans out is going to be absolutely fine.
I think it's going to be absolutely fabulous because you're connected, right? Yeah. I think that I've really started to learn a lot about what we're talking about, and it's an awareness, and it's really something that we don't know about, like this awareness of ourselves, and who am I, and why? What is your why? Well, you know what? Who's got time to sit and stop and think about that stuff, right? Everybody's running around, busy, 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 and what do you want your future to look like? What do you want? I don't know. Like, who stopped, right? I actually really wasn't really, everything is always great or whatever, but it's really important to stop and just, but I just don't think that many of us are doing that. I think that it's like what you're saying. I think that it's becoming something that people are becoming aware of, but this awareness and awakening thing it's big. It's a huge piece for our happiness.
I think you're absolutely correct. It's not something that we're taught. When we do come into an awareness of it, it can be very difficult to know how to implement that into our daily lives. If we aren't aware of it, but there is an unconscious desire for it, life will make us aware of it. So I read an interesting quote some time ago that I still ponder on, and it was along the lines of, suffering is only necessary until it's not. Suffering is only necessary until it's not. So I do believe that we can totally grow in our wisdom and live a full, rich, and meaningful life without necessarily having to suffer as such. Now, I'm not saying that life doesn't happen and that difficult things don't happen, but when I look back, most of the difficulties I created myself. I have to take full responsibility for them. They came from my thinking, my perception of myself, of other people, of how life is. And I have to take full responsibility for that. Now, yes, situations happened that I wouldn't wish on myself or anyone else. However, again, looking back on those experiences, they were, I think, life's way of getting my attention. And sometimes life has to go to some very major places to get our attention. Once it has our attention, I don't think we can control what happens in life. I do believe we can absolutely influence and master how we experience it.
And I believe you are 100% accurate. Like, our thoughts, and they create the feelings, and then we're manifesting that energy, and we're not even usually aware that that's what's going on. And and that whole victim thing, I'm telling you, it is the toughest thing, because that is happening to me there, and this is a disservice to me. But you can't look at it, because then you give your power away, and then you don't move forward. You get to take that with you. And that is such a tough, I've been working through this for a few years, and I'll tell you what, I get it. I understand it. Implementing it and not going down the rabbit hole with the victim is because we've got generations of patterns that we watched and our parents watched, and so on, is what I understand. And they're deep, and we're not even aware that we're running them. right? And so, yeah, we're responsible for all of it because we're in this lower vibration, and then we get where we're at, we get more of it. It's becoming aware of our thoughts. You are 100%, it's everything. And those thoughts then create a feeling. So if that's what it is, we've got to marinate in how we want to feel. Like, how do we want to feel? That's what I've decided, right? I don't know what exactly it looks like, but I know how I want to feel. And so I just have really focused on that, right? Just the feeling, and breathing into the heart, the brain heart coherence, and I've been able to shift a lot of old patterns, and being able to forgive and realize that it was a gift that they were being like that to me. Right. But it took a long time for me to, right, even though I know that stuff, right, I've known it for many years. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, it's tough. Right.
It's a big switch going from this has happened to me to this has happened for me, especially when it's a very potentially traumatic experience. So for me, one of the most difficult experiences I had, which however had a lot of gifts within it, was way back in my early days when I first started working overseas, and I was based in Hungary, and I was walking home from visiting a friend, and I was followed. Now, at the time, that didn't particularly concern me because I also had quite a major issue with my back and was wearing an elasticized back brace. So my ability to move was very restricted, and I was very slow in walking, especially up these stairs that I was walking up. And so I did hear some steps behind me, and those steps did speed up, which again was not unusual because I had to walk so slow at that time because I was in pain from this back issue and had that very limited mobility. However, the next thing that happened was that this person grabbed me around the neck, and I ended up, I wasn't sure at the time what exactly was going on. I knew that he wanted to grab my handbag, but it was slung around my neck. So it was very difficult for him to grab it because it wasn't just sitting on my shoulder. And in the process of that, I realized that he had a knife and that he had used it because I had felt this digging into my back of something, but couldn't quite work out what it was because I wasn't experiencing any physical pain. However, I then realized what was happening, and it was this very strange two-speed experience because on the one hand I there was the me that was now I was on my knees. I had been stabbed in the back. He also cut me on my hand, so I could feel that there was blood on my hand, and at that moment I thought, okay, this is the other part of me that was watching all of this in quite slow motion. So the one me on my knees, screaming very loudly and obviously they're terrified about what was happening. The other part of me quite calm and observing all this and almost looking at it and going, okay, so this is how it ends. And not being caught up in what was happening. It was a very, very weird experience. And then thankfully some people came running. They took me to a local bar that was open where they were able to call the ambulance, and I was taken to the hospital. And it was where I had a very, one of those life-defining moments where where I was aware that I had so many different ways that I could deal with this experience. I didn't go into full shock somehow. I remember being quite lucid the whole way through. I had only lived in Hungary for a year. My language was limited, but I had to communicate in my very basic Hungarian to the people in the cafe, because no one really spoke a lot of English until I got to the hospital. One of the first really difficult moments was when the specialist who examined me, I think he was a neurosurgeon, he told me I was very lucky because the knife wound had, the initial impact had been diminished because he hit the back brace first. And the jiggling that I had felt in my back was him trying to maneuver around the brace. Now, eventually the knife did go in, but not at full power. Had it gone in full power, the specialist said I'd either be in a wheelchair or dead. And that's why I felt very grateful to be alive. I was very grateful that I wasn't super seriously injured. And so when I said to him that I was lucky, his response was, well, and I had said, you know, God was looking after me. And
I apologize. I never have the ringer on. That's just crazy. Sorry about that. I just can't even believe that this happened to you. That's incredible.
Neither could I, because this is something that always happens to other people. And so when he said, well, if you think you're lucky because you think God was looking out for you, then God wasn't doing a very good job, was he?
Excuse me?
Yeah. And I kind of thought, oh, okay. And I didn't quite know what to do with that. So I put it aside. And it was later that night when I was alone in that hospital room. It was nothing like a hotel. This was Eastern Europe, just after the borders opened. So it was all still very outdated in that sense. He was amazing. He was highly skilled and a knowledgeable specialist. However, I think his personal skills were a little bit dodgy.
Excuse me.
But those words came back that night when I had a nightmare, and I kind of dreamt about what had happened, thinking it was a nightmare, until I woke up, because I had turned on my back and the drain tube in my back dug into me, and realized that the nightmare that I thought was a dream had actually happened. And like you say, but this doesn't happen. The first part of it was trying to get my head around the fact that this has happened, and it's happened to me, this normal person from Adelaide, like really. And then those words came back to me that the specialist had said. And it was quite a strong spiritual crisis that I went through that night, because I did think, well, yes, does he have a point? Was God really looking after me? If, like, couldn't that whole experience been prevented? What was it all about? The why me, that slippery slide into self-pity, into being a victim. You know, well, I'm here, you know, working as a volunteer, trying to serve God and others, and this is how I'm rewarded.
You're alone. That's also, I'm really hearing.
And I was alone. I mean, I worked as part of a team, but at that moment, I was alone in the middle of the night. I had never felt so abandoned and isolated and alone, I don't think ever before or since. However, what happened next, I still to this day cannot explain. I had a very powerful sense of the presence of God. And by that, I mean a sense that I wasn't alone, an overwhelming sense of love and peace that came, to the point where, you know, when you're lying on a bed and someone sits on the edge of the bed and it sinks.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it was a real sensation or not, but it felt as if someone was sitting on the edge of my bed, had sat down, had put their hand on my leg and basically said, it's going to be okay. And I went to sleep. The next morning, at that time, I would have considered myself a very committed Christian. Spiritually, I'm in a very different place now, but I did carry around a little New Testament. And the next morning, I was waiting to be seen by the doctor. I opened it up, and I opened it up at a book in the New Testament, Romans chapter 8. And the words that sprang out at me were, nothing can separate us from the love of God. It goes on to say all the things that cannot separate us from the love of God. And it goes through height and depth and this and that. One of the items it mentions is a sword.
Shut the front door. How?
And I thought, okay, if a sword can't separate me from God, not and death nor life, if it's all one thing, one whatever it is, then a small knife that someone cannot separate me from the love of God. So that helped me to then make the decision. And I knew I had a decision to make. Do I go down the path of being a victim, of blame, of, that whole, this happened to me and how dare and everything? Or do I take the path of love and forgiveness, in the sense of forgiveness being that this happened, and looking back now, that idea of forgiveness has changed a lot as well. And I now look back on that and realize, you know what, this happened not just for me, but also for him.
I agree.
I don't know what happened with this person. I don't know his story, why he felt that that's what he needed to do. However, I was able to go, you know what, I will let it go. And I will go down a path of love and forgiveness and healing. And it was amazing. I did have some it took me a while to get to work through that experience and not have panic attacks, not overreact when someone patted me on the back, or you know how sometimes people approach you from the back and they slap you on the back. Now I'm fine, but for a few years, if you did that, I would scream. But I never had to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder or anything like that. It was really interesting. It kind of made me stronger rather than shook my faith or my desire to live life and live it to the full. I didn't want it to define me or limit me. And to be honest, after some time of recovery and healing, it actually hasn't. What it did do,
the biggest gift. How old were you? Because you were given a huge gift there, if you ask me.
I was in my mid-20s.
So that's pretty young to understand to not go into victim and to not blame. And do you know what? Because I think we can go through a whole lifetime and not understand that is what that's even happening, that we're doing that, right? And we're all doing it, and we do it all day long, and everybody does it. You don't think anything about it because it's just how
it's always a choice.
Yeah. But
now, I do have my little pity parties still, in that sense. I am still learning. I'm not there, and I'm not sure that any of us ever will be there, wherever there is. Something happens, it's like, oh, why me? But I get over it very, very quickly because I pick up on it straight away and go, Carey, and I have to give myself a bit of that look. That's not the way that you want to deal with life. So it still comes up that the feeling sorry for myself and seeing myself a little bit as a victim when something happens that doesn't align with how I want everything to be. However, that experience really did teach me, you know what, that's not how you want to be or who you want to be. And to go back to living from a place of love and understanding that's the choice that I make.
Wow. Do you know what? I just think right there, I just think that's it right there, all of it. And you were gifted that, and your life coaching and giving that information to people, because we don't know how to get out of the patterns of victim, and we don't get to create a new fresh life until we actually release it and don't have any resentment, or we forgive ourselves, and we just see that, okay, it was a divine thing to wake me up so that I can see that I'm not going to live like that. Like that's an incredible story. And the fact that, you've got these different parts of you, right? Like there's one part of you, like the untethered soul, he's explaining, like, who am I? Well, so if you're the listener, right, you're not the object, you're not the body, you're not that, right? You're not the thoughts, you're the watcher, right? So there is two of us, but most people, like, and my girlfriends, we're just one, and there's nothing else after, right? And it's such a gift to have that awareness.
I didn't understand that as much at the time, this idea that we are, we're all one, and we're all part of an interconnected whole, but we have this aspect of how we present ourselves in the world that is a construction, that is not the real who we are. But that's often we identify so strongly with that constructed self. And for many of us at some time, if not unfortunately and very sadly for the majority of our lives, we think that is who we actually are, that we are our personality and our CV and our external appearance and that constructed self, and don't realize that underneath is the essential self of who we really are. And that was the one that was looking down at the constructed self that was having that experience.
Consciousness is what he explains it as. It's just, that's consciousness. And without it,
I couldn't articulate it at the time.
Nothing there.
And it's really interesting now with that understanding and wisdom, being able to look back on that. The other wisdom that I took from that, and I hope others don't have to go through extreme experiences in the same sense, but once you confront your own mortality and death and realize that death is nothing to be afraid of, it frees up so much. Now, I'm not saying I don't get afraid. I still have fears. But again, I recognize what's happening and don't have to let it hook me in and drag me through my life as a prisoner of it. And I also, in a weird sort of way, the experience taught me that I don't need to be afraid of fear. Now I have, interestingly enough, since then had bouts of very high anxiety where the issue was being afraid of fear and the whole what if future scenario. Thankfully, and I will say that probably having a regular meditation practice was the life changer for me. And also going through a spiritual, process of letting go of any type of spiritual belief that was fear-based, helped in that transition to the point now where, yes, I feel fear. Generally, it's my own generated anxiety, but I can recognize it very quickly and let it go. It doesn't determine or define my life or how I live it anymore. I can feel it, acknowledge it, and then thank it and send it on its way. And that has been an amazing process. It's not, it's just something that's happened over the last 20, 30 years. But I can look back now, and I think that's one of the wonderful things when we do start this second half of life, that we have the ability to reflect on our lives and see, okay, this led to that, and the connections and the patterns and how it's all helped us to bring us to where we are today, where we can serve others from a place of fullness and richness and wisdom in a way that maybe we couldn't in our first half of life.
Well, and without the falling on our face, we're not, when everything's going good, we're not learning anything. We're just floating, right? And then all of a sudden we come, life brings us whatever to get us to expand and go in and grow and clean up the garbage. And nobody would be where they are without all of the trials and tribulations. But I love, actually, we were talking about this earlier, like the love and the fear, right? And as a little girl, I was frightened of the dark. I saw spirits, like actually above my mom's bed, 3 of them. I was probably 4, and she was not to come home, but my first vision of my mom was me opening my eyes, looking across the hall room. I didn't really know it was my mom, but I knew it was my mom because she was, 90 pounds and her hair went white and blah, 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 blah. But there was 3 incredible spirits. I was 4 years old. I can see it today, my whole life. But of course, my sisters, they teased me, they laughed at me, and I never told anybody ever again, type thing, right? But I could feel and hear, and I was so scared. I lived my whole life in fear of the dark. I left lights on, like it was just a horrible, like right up till I was like 23, I'd have to sleep with the lights on. But I came up with this saying when I was younger, like 16. We did some courses on this kind of work, and I learned this saying: where there's love, there is no fear. And I would mantra this in my head to help myself calm myself, and then I would have this vision, like, it's like the dark room. If you turn the light on, which I always had, right, then there's no dark, right? So there really is no fear because there's only love that is real, right? So I'd have this stuff rolling around in my head, and it's funny, but I remembered it in this last few years where I really needed it. It kind of came back, but I was quite young when I was, having all that, but it kind of just slid back in, and it's like turning the light on in a dark room, right? When there's love there, as soon as you go to love, fear's gone. They can't hold the same space. And
it's a beautiful metaphor, because you're absolutely right. The two cannot coexist. It's either we're living in that place of light and love where it can't coexist. It just doesn't work that way. And understanding that, and that we can, once we perceive what's happening, and we can make that choice, and we can make it every moment, how often we have to, until it becomes more and more of the default. And I've experienced that when we start getting these lessons and integrating them, then we actually do learn also from when life flows with ease and peace and calm. We then don't need the upheavals to learn, and we can actually rest and enjoy life and serve from that place of abundance. Now, not to say that then nothing ever happens to unsettle us, but my experience has been that as I integrate the lessons and actually then really live from that place, life starts flowing so much more smoothly and easily, because I'm not hanging on to it, trying to make something happen or drive it or control it. I'm learning that as I go with that flow in the moment, trusting that whatever that needs to happen happens, then those difficult moments start diminishing, and we can learn the lessons from, or I feel I can learn those lessons from that place of ease and peace and calm, and be of more service, especially over the last 2 years. When COVID first started, I knew that we were at a very important point in history.
Oh boy.
It was unsettling. At the same time, I thought, yes, finally, this was what I was born for almost. This is where we get a chance to reimagine how we want to live, what kind of world we want to create, what kind of life is going to be more supportive and enjoyable and peaceful and all of that. At the same time, I saw people around me freaking out, losing it, hoarding toilet paper, all of it. And I remember it was very similar to the stabbing experience. I knew that I had a choice in that moment. How do I want to experience and be in this, whatever this is? Because at that time, none of us knew what it was all about. And I remember thinking, you know what? I want to be the calm, supportive person. I don't want to be the one that freaks out. And also I still had the coaching support work that I do. I knew I would be of no use to anyone, especially those that were accessing that support service, if I was losing it. So
well, that fear, right? Choosing fear. And but because it was broadcast, that it was like everybody was in fear, right? People wouldn't even look at each other in the grocery store. It was like somebody was that person was going to kill you, or it was just such a horrible situation.
It wasn't that intense here, I have to say. The way that we experienced it, especially in my state, yes, we had those moments, but in my community, again, who knows, maybe it's just how I experienced it, but my community was incredibly supportive. People were very loving and kind, because I think that's how we chose to experience it. I'm not saying that there weren't people who weren't like that. The ones I personally I didn't encounter them personally. It was very interesting. When I made the decision about how I was going to be through this time, and now I'm not saying I didn't have my moments of discombobulation where I suddenly thought, okay, we are living in very interesting times. But again, I could acknowledge that feeling of being unsettled and maybe a bit panicky at times, but then regain that equilibrium and say, okay, but right now, right here, you are in the right place and you have everything that you need. Now, how can you support those that need it? But first, supporting myself, of course. I really was very aware that I needed to make sure I maintained those practices for my own health and well-being, and that they would be non-negotiable regardless. So it's been another interesting, I guess, experiment or experience these past 2 years in how much of a choice we have in how we experience life. Even though the reality might be very similar for everyone, how we personally experience it depends a lot on our perception.
100%, I agree. I experienced just the collective energy of, and the news and right. It was just, just that collective fear energy. And so being quite a little empath that I am, I'm very sensitive to the energies. And so you obviously a little bit further advanced than me. I was still working through lots of lots of trauma and patterns in relationships. I've kind of come up out of the rabbit hole after about 3.5, 4 years. But I don't know that, I mean, I knew not to watch the news. I don't know that I was really thinking to myself that this is a choice, even though I know that, but I think that having a life coach, just having somebody who has those tools and has that, just the understanding and the awareness to even share that it's a choice. I learned how to ask. If you ask, you receive, you receive.
Mhm.
And I wasn't brought up with any religion, or I didn't know anything about anything. I just know that I saw some spirits. So I knew there was something other than what we're seeing going on, even though I didn't know what that was. But I learned how to ask. And when I ask, wow, it's so powerful. When you ask and you believe, you receive. It's, yeah. So I ended up on my knees a few times, but I'll tell you what, there is such an amazing universe going on that we are so unaware of. Most of us, we just think that we're these people and these objects and these desks, and we're the only thing in the universe that's alive. There are no other beings. And it's just so incredible, our perception, what we're perceiving, right? But perception is it's a big word. And I've really understood. Yeah. Everything is how we're perceiving it, right? We're all
absolutely. And that perception, it is a choice, and it is our responsibility. The capacity to which we are aware of that is where the difference is. We all have the capacity, but maybe because of where we're at in life and who we have around us, that will make it more or less difficult to be able to make that choice. But I think just being aware of that is already huge. And then you build the capacity to, and the awareness, it also comes to awareness to know, okay, my perception has just shifted from this to that. And then having that awareness when it shifts, so that you can shift back if it's not if it's not that place of love and compassion and support, then we know that we can make that shift again. And I find gratitude for me is the quickest way to make that emotional shift. The other health and well-being practices are a really important part of that for me. The making sure that the nutrition I take in, I live 500 meters from the beach. So for me, beach walks, especially at sunset, are just, they've just made it such a difference to me to be able to navigate these past 2 years and life in general. Getting the sleep that I need, which is still a challenge sometimes. The meditation. I mean, with me, it's totally self-inflicted. So again, it's, something that's for me the greatest challenge, is having that discipline to do what I know is healthy for me. And of course, that's not something I manage to maintain 100% of the time. I'm still learning those disciplines as well. But I know now that I can't let them go, because when I do, I don't have the strength or the capacity or the health physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally to be who I want to be and need to be and live the life that I want to live. So it's, yeah.
You know what? That's
not without its challenges, but
it's so great that you're saying that, because it is so big. Going through a bunch of trauma myself, and then not having, the proper sleep, and not having the exercise that I used to have, or, that moving that energy through our body, so it's not stuck and stagnant in our bodies, right? It's just all, it's food, feeding yourself properly, when you're not feeling, when you're depressed and you're low, all of that went south. And then you're not able to deal with what's in front of you properly because you're depleted. But it's this loop, this circle, and it's I mean, I'm just starting to come out of it. I look at some of my podcasts, and I always cried. I was always crying for, I mean, I cried for years, but literally I haven't cried for like maybe 3 or 4 weeks. That's the longest stint for me in 4 years. Like, I just ended up in a rabbit hole, and like, I had no idea that, that kind of trauma. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think that most of us know or understand when somebody has PTSD or they have, right? We're so judgy, and we're, like, I had so many, oh, you look awful, right? And it would just be, all of those things. But what you're saying is that balance. It's, it's so.
However, when you look at what you've experienced,
yeah,
and you've only alluded to it very briefly, but it sounds huge. Yeah. I have never had to deal with a fraction of what you've dealt with over these past few years. Now look at where you are now.
I'm grateful to be alive.
From what I can tell, you have already come such a long way in that healing process. So yeah, I just want to,
I'm grateful,
acknowledge everything that you have obviously done, because you had other choices that you could have taken that would have taken it even further down that dark hole, and you didn't. And now see where you are, and imagine in a, down the track, that rich experience that you've had, all that you will be able to share and give to other people when you are back in that place of fullness, which I'm sure you will get back to, or get to.
My children, I had to, and thank God that I had the understanding of this work, because it's always been my life. My friends always laugh at me and, tease, oh, she's talking that talk again, or whatever, right? Energy. And I just find it fascinating, the whole quantum field and Joe Dispenza. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just dove in, and I just healed. I just knew that I could find healing in that. I didn't, it was I don't wish that upon my worst enemy. But you know what, I chose it, and I guess that's what I needed to have to awaken. And just, I'm grateful. Gratitude. I'm just grateful. Yeah.
And that's a challenge. One of the challenges I'm setting for myself is to see if I can have my thinking either be thoughts of gratitude or that call for help when I need it.
Big.
Yes.
Asking for help. Yes.
Asking for help when I need it, and then coming from a place of love and gratitude when I don't. When life is going smoothly and well, being able to be fully grateful for that. And then when I am in a moment, being able to then remember to say help in this situation.
Well, and I didn't really know about that, because I didn't have any, understanding really about church and God and like, I knew all those, but I didn't have any intimate relationship. I do now. I developed these, just energetically by myself on my knees, dark night of the soul, right? And it's, you hear about that or whatever, but all of a sudden you find yourself in this place, and it's like, it's quite a thing. And I believe that I was there for me to share. Like, my daughter didn't make it, and And so natural healing is what I want to share. And if there's one person that listens to this podcast today and they hear one little thing, you know what? I'm good. I'm good. I can make it, I don't know how to do the public speaking properly. And it's been a real walking through fear and, just doing it anyways. And thankfully it became a thing that they like the authenticity and not the planned out scripts and stuff, because I'm not that person. I would have been able to do it. I read books and I put my own words in it still. But it's, I'm grateful. And you did say something about being here at this time. Like we're going down in history, right? And we need to stand up and not worry about what so-and-so is going to say about, oh, did you see her? No. Which is what we're all have. I mean, my children, my teenagers are, mom, turn the music down, you're driving to the schools, right? But this is society, right? We're all so worried about what everybody's thinking about us. Meanwhile, they're worried about what everybody's thinking about that. Like, it's just toxic. And the way out is this. The only way out is this work. And everybody has to do it. Nobody gets a free pass on this. We've got to clean up those thought patterns, and it takes some work, but boy, oh boy, like listen to your journey. It's worth it. It's worth it because there's clarity and peace and, and then the gift of giving it back.
It makes life so much better and enjoyable. And what can I say?
No, you said, you know what, you are a wonderful being. And I really, really am grateful that you came and shared this with me today and everybody else.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, you're a real gift. So we should probably wrap it up so that people can not have to stay on too long for a podcast, but I think that it doesn't matter the length. There's so much incredible information. Thank you for sharing your story. That's
thank you for the opportunity.
Incredible journey. Wow. But I think that you were given a gift.
I think we all are.
Ridiculous, right? Saying that, but it's just having the awareness of that so that you get to have that as a good part of your life. So that I don't know, it's just such a tough thing, that victim, as I've been down deep digging myself out of it. Poor me, right? But if you don't know any better, then you can't do any better, right?
But look where you are today.
Right? And you as well.
And here we are.
Walk on that Australian beach for me, would you? It's winter here. I think it's summer there, isn't it?
Supposedly. Oh. It's a bit slow kicking in, but we'll get there. So December is summer. However, it feels not very summery at the moment.
It doesn't. Well, we're having flooding and storms and stuff. So I don't know. The world's all kind of messed up right now. I think not just with the COVID, but
the wake up calls keep coming.
Right. I think that's what it all is about, right? It's just trying to wake up the greater, right? So we have to be uncomfortable before we'll look inside, I believe. Mm-hmm. Well, for myself anyways. But. Okay, well, let's wrap this up, and sending you all my love and light, and thank you again.
Thank you, Jackie. Take care.
Okay, I might track you down the line, or track me down, and we'll catch up maybe when you've written your book and you have new things to share. Let me know.
I will let you know. And who knows, if we get to travel again, I might just pop by Canada and we could have a coffee and a walk somewhere.
I live on the
in
beach
your wonderful part. There you go.
Right, White Rock Beach, and it's right on the U.S. Going into Seattle, so the Canada-U.S. border. It's beautiful.
Wonderful. I'll see you on a beach walk in a year or two.
Sounds good.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jackie.
Bye now.
Bye.